Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. I haven't seen you for a while. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love with those you love to do them with. That seems a bit of a stretch on this Monday morning, given what happened yesterday. Another abject performance, another horrendous first half effort, another scoreline that probably leaves a bit of a flattering to deceive in the eyes of most, maybe who didn't watch the game and just saw a 3-2 scoreline. I personally didn't get to see much of the game. The internet here has been dropping out again. Problems that are all too familiar. So maybe I missed a lot of the headache by not seeing what I have obviously subsequently seen the highlight reels of, and it doesn't look like a 3-2 scoreline was close to the reality. It looks more like we could have been 5-0 down at half time had it not been for a couple of good saves and some decent performances from the same people that you come to expect them from now, which is ridiculous to suggest. But the only consistent things about our football team, outside of its inconsistency, are the performances of our young players, Jed Spence and Archie Gray and Lucas Berghvall et al. These guys are carrying the can. Decky is obviously our best player in the team at the moment, and the rest can be okay at times, but are inconsistent at best. And if I'm entirely honest, just completely out on their legs, completely exhausted, and/or have lost faith in the manager, and/or just don't vibe with this model of football. And look, we're going to come to Ange Postecoglou. I'm not going to talk too specifically about the game because, like I say, I didn't really get a chance to watch too much of it, which is a blessing in disguise, I guess. But we are where we are, guys, and where we are is precarious. Let's be entirely honest here. We are in relegation form. We are hovering around the drop zone. Do I think we're going to go down? I really don't, and that's not just me saying that because I'm a Tottenham fan and the idea of it is so alien. Really, I think one of only 4 teams to have never been relegated in the Premier League era, or 5 teams maybe. I genuinely think that there are 3 teams worse than us, and I do think that we will be able to get enough points from our home games to be able to make sure that we're safe. But there's nothing safe in football. There's no guarantees, and right now, it does look a really precarious predicament that we are in, because it doesn't look like, as far as I can tell, that there's any transfers that are even close to being resolved. I'm not even going to sit here and say that we put all our eggs into 1 or 2 baskets and they went in different directions, because that doesn't really feel sincere or genuine either, and I don't want to be insincere with you. I think it's a really weird spot where I'm not used to Daniel Levy behaving the way he is on multiple fronts. Whatever you think about Daniel Levy, and I know a lot of you think of him far worse than I do, I don't think of him as anything like a sensational chairman in regards a lot of the areas that we care about, like regards our transfers, our ambition, our decision making, his inability to take the hands off the reins. I share your frustrations and all of those things. But one thing I would say about him is that, generally speaking, in the past, he has a track record, a historical rationale that when he thought his top 4 hopes were in jeopardy, that cash cow that is the Champions League, when those things were looking in bad shape, he would go to the well, he would find some money, and he'd ultimately usually spend it on the wrong players. But there was a higher frequency of him spending in the past, and think about the past, not in terms of budgetary comparisons, but put yourself back in those days and then look at the comparable spend in seasons where top 4 was at risk versus when it was more likely to be a consistent theme. And he would usually go bigger when there was risk on the table, which is kind of weird for a guy who's so against risk, so anti-risk, risk-averse as he is in the grand scheme of things. But there hasn't really been that much in the way of noise around any particular targets that we can sort of sink our teeth into. Ange Postecoglou, quite rightly, I guess, resolute on the idea of the rationale, at least, that January is a difficult window to do business in. And it is, right? It is. We all know that. You've got 31 days to get your transfers done. And if you're trying to buy players from teams that don't really want to sell those players, then they have to have a price point offered to them that is that's juicy enough to make sense of the additional stresses of having to find their replacement. They won't want to sell before they know who they can get in on at what price point. And those people won't want to sell until they know what they're going to get in replacement. And so you have this kind of domino effect, and it's almost like a Mexican standoff where everyone is like pointing guns at each other, but no one wants to shoot first because that just creates a horrendous outcome. And And it's a difficult situation to do all that in 31 days, right? It's a situation. It's like trying to sell your house and you're stuck in a chain. You sold your house to one guy, but he's in a chain with someone else and someone else, and that stuff happens all day long, every day, in every walk of life. But if you only have 31 days where everything has to close or nothing closes, it does create a predicament. I don't believe that there should be a 31-day window in January. I think they should stretch it out over 2 months or get rid of the transfer window process, entirely. I think the only reason the whole transfer window process came in with the window situation was because of European Union laws and around employment. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's the way it was. And those things are not quite as necessary for us this time around because of Brexit. And so if teams like Turkey and Saudi Arabia can get extra weeks on their transfer windows by being outside of those jurisdictions, I don't understand why we can't. But either way, that's for a different topic. Excuse me. So Ange is like rightly kind of saying to the public at least, look, it's difficult, but yeah, I do need help. And it doesn't look like it's coming, and you have to wonder why. So like, it's not a clear story for me, because that's in and of itself it's atypical for Daniel Levy to not go to the well when there's risk on, in terms of revenue, in terms of sustainability, in terms of safety. And whilst we're nowhere near the top 4, we are, heading in the wrong direction, and that danger zone, that shark-infested waters that looks like relegation, is just over there. And it's precarious, because this time around we don't have the buffer of the first 10 games like we did last season, where we could perform horrendously but still land in 5th. This time around it's been pretty abject the entire season. Look, injuries notwithstanding, and this is a whole other conversation, how responsible is Ange for it? I would make the argument that injuries are an explanation to a degree. You could then go into, well, who's responsible for the injuries? And there's an argument to say that some of it's luck, for sure. But a lot of it comes down to, your management of players and what you expect of them off the field, in terms of on the training ground, in terms of their recovery, whether they're allowed to do things, when they're not technically in the employment or in the kind of under the Tottenham hemisphere or whatever. Are they living their best life? Are they treating themselves well, etc.? In areas that are not necessarily monitored, and that to me, does come down to ultimately the guy who's in charge of the team, and that is Ange Postecoglou. So there is an argument to say, even if you are going to give him levity or leverage for the explanation of injuries being an impactful factor here, which I think there are, and I think it's true, but how much of that could have been avoided with better rotation, better selection, better utilisation of your squad? And let's be honest, as I said at the very start of this, the 4 players that have been a breath of fresh air for Tottenham this season, Archie Gray, Jed Spence, Lucas Berghvall mainly, those 3 wouldn't have had the minutes that they have had it not been for the injuries that have happened, right? And so, even the glimmering, shining lights of things to hang your hat on for positives from this season, those things wouldn't have emerged, in my opinion, had it not been for the luck or the impact of the injuries. And that is another concern, right? It's another concern. But let's go back to Daniel Levy for a second. So why hasn't he gone to the well? And why is it that he hasn't also pulled the trigger on Ange Postecoglou? Because there's no chance that you look back through the annals of Tottenham's history, the last 25 years, there's no chance you're going to find another similar scenario where a manager has had this long of a run. Is it 49 games in the Premier League, 24 losses? Half of your games in charge are losses. It's not acceptable at Tottenham. It's not acceptable at most clubs. And yet, there's no sign of it changing. Even if you looked into last season when we got some of those players back, the form didn't change. So why is it that Daniel Levy hasn't pulled the trigger? And also, why is it that him and Joe Lewis and Enoch invested that money, which is still unclear to me whether it's the 11 million or 35 million. Some places were saying it's 11, other places are saying it's 35 million. But either way, they only got 0.35 or 0.32% increase in ownership, which either values the club at £10 billion, which I know sounds ridiculous and therefore it's not true, but actually that is a tactic, Bugsy! That is a tactic of startups to like self-invest, self-fund at a certain valuation level, so that you can then, when you go to your next round of funding, you can say to the seed investors, the last funding valuation was at X, therefore we're going to go higher from there, or at least stick to around that number. It's the oldest trick in the book in terms of startup funding, but it's not something that's usually successful or even remotely plausible when you're a multi-billion pound established company like Tottenham Hotspur is. So it's unusual, but then at the same time, so would be the valuation if it was only 11 million at 2.5 billion, because that smacks in the face of the previous valuation where they put the 100 million pound in at 7.5 billion pound valuation back 3 years ago. Anyway, why do that? Why are you doing that? Why such a low number? What's the benefit of 11 million or 30 million? How much does it really move the needle? Why are you doing that if you're looking for an investment? There's so many kind of contrasting and conflicting narratives that don't really make sense to me, and it's hard to land in an area where there seems like it's an obvious plan. To me, it's clear that he's trying to get investment. If he's trying to do it whilst also pulling the smoke over the investors' eyes by saying, well, the last valuation was at 10 billion, therefore for your 500 million, you're only going to get this much of the company, versus the real valuation would be 3 billion, 3.5 billion, and therefore you'd get 3 times that valuation. If he thinks that these investors are stupid enough to fall for that, then he's ridiculous. If that money is going into a different valuation around, hotels and property, we don't know any of the details, but the fact that it happened just before Christmas, the fact that there's absolutely no noise around any transfers being close to being emerging at Tottenham right now, the fact that there is, according to the reports, no real risk to Ange Postecoglou's job, and that it's business as usual, and the fact that we're so precarious to the relegation zone, the whole thing is just so unorthodox and atypical for Daniel Levy's Tottenham that I can't really make heads or tails of it. And one of the outcomes I might lead myself into thinking is that maybe all of that stuff leads you to think that maybe there is something that's happened in the background with regards a future investment, with regards someone else joining the table who has requested that these things not happen or happen in a certain way, because it's not Daniel Levy that's going to be sort of worrying about that stuff as much in a few months. And that's massive hypothesis, massive speculation. I just think that after 25 years of knowing Daniel Levy as we do, there's nothing about this situation that looks remotely usual. It looks entirely abnormal to think that we're sitting on our hands. And Ange says, oh, they're doing their best. And like I said at the start, I understand that 31 days isn't enough, right? I get it. And I get all the difficulties of doing January windows. But Manchester City don't seem to struggle. They've managed to find £250 million to pay for Haaland's 10-year, 9.5-year contract. They found another £190 million to go after the likes of Mamouche and Kuzanov and Cambiasso and Vicario, right? And at the same time, their owners are also investing or have invested in arenas around Manchester and building a new hotel and a new stand, I think, in the north end of the City Stadium. And so, like, if there's the intent and there's the willingness, then you can get things done. But you have to go into those conversations with an appreciation of what you're asking of the other side. And like I said, you are asking them to lose players that they don't want to lose, and that they have to then go and find replacements for. And in that Mexican standoff, someone has to pull the trigger first. And if it's Manchester City doing it, then you have to pay over the odds to make it worth the other person's while. And that's not Daniel Levy's style, is it? He doesn't do it that way, which is a frustration for everybody. But ultimately, Daniel Levy's Tottenham have also been the highest spending football team in the January window, I believe, for the last, 3 seasons running? I think one of the seasons, it was either last summer or last January or the one before that. We spent more money, I believe, than the other 19 teams combined because of FFP and PSR. Now, there is no FFP and PSR risks right now because of more ridiculousness from the Premier League. And that's a whole other topic. By the way, get over to Sean Butler TV and get over to Football Link. Links in the description where we talk about that stuff all the time. Johnny and I on Football Link, or myself on Sean Butler TV. Like, it's got to a point where, like, in a world where there's no PSR or FFP problems and everyone who was close can kick the can down the road, or everybody now is waking up and going, well, look, we're all billionaire owners and we all have third-party assets that are either within the club or could be within the club, and we can just buy them from each other, lease them back, make paper profits on the book that don't really stack up to any kind of reality. If you were to audit them, it wouldn't make any sense. But in terms of the ridiculously lax laws that the FFP and PSR have provided, there's a never-ending stream of loopholes for clever accountants and lawyers to figure out. Then where's the rest of the spend as well in January? There are other teams that have done a few bits, but you would think that there would be a market now where a lot of owners who have ambitions to improve, who do need cover in certain areas, are going to be looking towards the ability to just make paper profits and then therefore have cash investments that they can put into certain player assets. And it's not really happening at Tottenham. It hasn't really happened in too many other places. But like I say, everything for me right now feels incredibly weird. It feels incredibly like there's something else going on, and I don't know what it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. Maybe I'm just speculating. With regards Ange, I'll finish on this. Look, I've said he was the guy before I knew he was the guy. I've said that when you look at the crazy situation in which Conte's departure sort of left us in. We faced spells with Stellini and Mason twice. We went 6 weeks into the summer, was it, before we even got Ange Postecoglou. There's no demonstration from me that Daniel Levy ever has the prescience or the forethought, the foresight to be planning for what's next whilst you have what you do have. Not like a Brighton that, Bloom over there has got the next 3 managers, the next 3 social media marketing specialists or whatever in line for when the 2 before them depart. There's none of that forward planning at Tottenham in terms of on the pitch at least. And so if you were to sack Ange right now, you're going to have Ryan Mason. And maybe the reason why there's no noise about him being sacked is because Daniel Levy is sitting there thinking, in all likelihood, the market's dry. The market's dry. Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to Bournemouth and get Areola in the middle of the season? You're going to have to pay £20 million compensation to Bournemouth. You're going to have to pay that man 5 times what he's currently getting, which isn't that much relative to other managers we've had recently, but still, unproven at this level. I'm not poo-pooing the idea. I think the guy is brilliant. But I thought the same about many managers that have taken teams from nowhere to being a competitor, and then they get their chance and it doesn't work out, or they don't get their chance but they end up falling away anyway, because sustainable success at the top level is very difficult when you're knocking on that very heavy door, the Fort Knox door that is getting into the top 4 and actually trying to be accomplished. Iriola's a risk, and I don't know why he would leave right now. Marco Silva, same thing. Do you really see Marco Silva being the solution to take Tottenham to the promised land? I'm not sure. He's a good manager. He's flexible. I like what he says. I've got nothing but praise for the guy. Same with you. I like them both. I really do. But like I say, there's a never-ending list of managers that have gone from here to here and then failed to go from here to here. The one that got closest was Pochettino, who would be my choice. But he's not going to leave America until after the World Cup at least, which is 18 months away. So how do you fill the gap for 18 months? Do you do it? Do you let Ange run its course and hope that we don't get relegated but kind of see the wood for the trees? Probably not. Right? Do you sack him and then spend the next 3 months still in a relegation battle with Ryan Mason in charge? I hope not. Do you get in a stopgap? Bugsy! Do you get in a stopgap for 18 months and then go for Poch? What's that, a rebuild before the rebuild? I don't know. Bugsy's driving up the wall. Bugsy, stop it! Sorry, guys, 1 second. And the last thing I'd say is I don't see even someone like Thomas Frank at Brentford wanting to leave. 8 years he has been at Brentford. He's never shied away from speculation about his future. He has never ever said, "I'm happy here. I'm here forever. I'm here for the long term." He's always been open-minded about the idea of a departure. And I like Thomas Frank, but he is pragmatic and he's a pivot back towards where we came from. That pendulum will swing back this way a little bit too far for me. So I look at the market and I think there's not that much available. It's not that desirable for those people to leave to come to us. I don't really want Ryan Mason. I share your concerns about Ange Postecoglou. Again, yesterday, he went to a back 3. People say he doesn't change. I say he won't change because he can't change. There was a program, Ainsley Harriott used to do it, can't cook, won't cook. Can't change, won't change. The reason why he never changed his tactics too much was because he never found the time on the training ground to dedicate to a plan B or a plan C. He thought the message was far more important than anything else. And after 20 months, I guess he's finally realised that the message isn't getting through, or that it's not clear enough, or it's just not a good enough message at this standard. And so for the first time, despite in the last few weeks we've seen some pivots gently in the tactics, wider fullbacks, longer balls, all these sorts of things, ultimately, yesterday we saw the first pivot to a back three, and it looked absolutely awful. There's nothing wrong with the back three in principle. I think a lot of people do think that it would actually suit our system and his football to play a back three and allow the fullbacks to be able to get forward. But he does it for the first time. It looks terrible. I don't think that means that the system doesn't work. I think it just is a demonstration of that you're in January, and I have absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Ange Postecoglou started that training a back three system probably on Tuesday of last week. And that's the problem. If you only have one way of playing, then as much as you guys and everyone is right to say, where's our plan B? Pivot, do something bloody different. If you haven't trained it, then what you end up with is what you saw in the first half yesterday. And it's ridiculous that other managers can find the time to practice for a plan A, plan B and plan C, and also find time to do SWOT analysis of the other team. They can factor in variables and considerations and context, and yet Ange Postecoglou thinks that plan A landing is more important than anything until it isn't. And then you expect to just throw the boys in at the deep end and figure out a whole new system that many of them, given their age, won't have ever learnt before. It was always going to be difficult, but like I say, if Everton, the last time Everton scored 3 goals was against Sligo, and they drew that game, and the time before that was back in 2023 against Newcastle. It shows you where we're at. No disrespect to Everton, but that's it really wasn't good enough, and it's another one compounding on itself. I'm just stuck in the middle here, as always, trying to be balanced with you, trying to figure out, if he isn't the guy, are you ready for the next guy now? I wasn't, but I think at the moment it's difficult to make any argument that is in sort of solidarity defending of Ange Postecoglou. There really isn't that strong an argument to support anything more from this guy, apart from better the devil you know than the devil you don't. What do you do if you sack him? And do you have any faith, and I know most of you hate Daniel Levy, do any of you have any faith that Daniel Levy has already figured out who his plan B is? The only name that we've heard in that regard, who we haven't actually heard from directly, but suggests that there might be something to it, and we have to lean into the Turkish Besiktas CEO, president, to believe this story, is Terzic from Dortmund, who was supposed to be on the list to go to Besiktas, and he said, the president said, we had him on our list, but he's expecting an offer from Tottenham. If there's truth to that, then I'm okay with it. But I tell you what, with Terzic, you are going to have fireworks. He's a really cool tactician. I like him. He can be pragmatic when he wants to be. He literally changes the tactic in game. He is someone who's like an absolute, he's like the Fabio Paratici or the Paratici of the management world. And as much as he's always busy, he's always on the phone, he's always doing things, he's never standing still. His energy will excite many of you. He's not necessarily an all-out attacking manager. And in fact, for Dortmund in his season when he got to the Champions League final, he was criticised for being a little bit too pragmatic in many of those games. But either way, he's certainly got enough tricks up his sleeve. He's a young, energetic guy. What I would say, though, with regards to him, I've got no issues with him coming in because I think that, as I say, the only name that I'm really on board with is Pochettino, and I think it's impossible to get him in anytime soon. But Terzic is a guy that's spent time as assistant manager, as manager, and as director of football to people that are used to getting their own way. Slavan Bilic at West Ham, Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, and at Borussia Dortmund, they made a role for him in the boardroom. That's how highly they thought of him. He ended up getting the management spot, and then some big sort of figureheads in the squad, older faces in the team, ended up sort of resenting, I think, the politics of having to take orders from someone that's about the same age as they were, and it got a little bit spicy. But he's someone that wants control. And do you really think that Daniel Levy is going to take his hands off the reins? We've already got too many cooks, too many chefs. I've lost it again. What is it? Too many, whatever. Damn it. I've lost the phrase. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians in the boardroom. You've got Scott Munn, you've got Paratici, you've got Langer, you've got McKenzie, you've got Donna Cullen, who you know has still got the ear of Daniel Levy. And of course you've got Daniel Levy, who despite all these people coming into the club with the idea of him taking his hands off the reins, he can't help it. He's already been involved in the failed attempt to sign Mwani. He was involved in convincing Kinsky's father, the Jez Spence deal. You know, if it happens for those three audibly and visually, it happens for all of them. He can't take his hands off the reins. Is someone like Terzic going to want to come to Tottenham and say, I want to do things my way, I've got a plan, a vision to how do you get from here to here, and then he may or may not have issues with the players because of his style, but he'll definitely have issues with Daniel Levy, won't he? I'll leave it there, guys. If it's not him, and it's not Iriola for the financial reasons, if it's not Thomas Frank for the pragmatism, who is it? How does it happen? Why would anyone leave Tottenham right now? In any event, does that give Ange Postecoglou a reprieve? I don't think so. Does it give him a get-out-of-jail card? I think it's unforgivable, some of the stuff that we're seeing. But you know what? I have said, until I see the players have lost faith in him, until he's lost the dressing room and until we're out of one of the cups, which is Liverpool next, I would stick with it. And I haven't seen us lose the cups yet, and I still haven't seen the players not playing for him. Although you could argue that they haven't been really playing for him the whole season. Look, I'm surprised that there's not more noise about his sacking from around the club from the journalists. The fact that it isn't there is very odd to me. The fact that there's no activity in the January transfer window is incredibly odd to me. The fact that we have mismatched information around some sort of new valuation of the club with regards to investment at this particular point in time is very odd to me. Something is going on at Tottenham. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll chew it over, no doubt, this week. Like, subscribe and comment, guys. And as always,